Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are unpacking something that, well, I think it's been humming in the background of everyone's mind lately.
A specific kind of tension, right?
Exactly, this specific kind of tension. You know that feeling when you're standing in a grocery aisle holding a plastic wrapped vegetable,
Huh?
or you're scrolling on a phone made of who knows what minerals,
Mm-hmm.
and you get this sinking realization that just by existing, by living your normal daily life,
Yeah.
you are feeding systems that you actually kind of hate.
It's the modern dilemma, isn't it? That feeling of complicity. We are painfully aware of the impact of our consumption, yet we're just so embedded in it all.
It creates this massive amount of, I don't know, cognitive dissonance.
It really does.
And honestly, my immediate instinct when I feel that guilt is one of two things. Either I just shut down because it feels too big to fix,
Or,
or I have this fantasy of the nuclear option, the one selling everything, buying a cabin in the woods, growing my own kale, and just never scanning a barcode again. Total abstinence.
yeah. Ugh. The cabin in the woods fantasy. It is incredibly common. It's this idea that the only way to be ethical is to opt out entirely, which is, well, it's a form of societal starvation.
Right.
But the source material we are diving into today argues that this binary thinking, either total complicity or total isolation, is actually a trap. It suggests the opt-out strategy just doesn't work because, you can't influence a system you've completely abandoned.
Right, and that's the pivot that really hooked me on this text. The author argues the solution isn't rejection at all. It is something called conscious participation.
Precisely. It's a shift from being a passive cog in the machine to being an active, intentional agent.
And so that's the mission of this deep dive, really, to explore how we can withdraw what the text calls blind consent from these systems without completely destroying our own lives in the process.
The withdrawal of blind consent. That phrase is so powerful.
It is. It sounds so much more actionable than dismantle global capitalism before breakfast. So today we're going to unpack this. We'll talk about the difference between deprivation and pacing, the superpower of sufficiency, and why shame is actually the worst possible fuel for change.
It's a fascinating framework because it moves the goalposts. It stops asking, what exactly should I buy? And starts asking, how am I engaging with the world?
So let's start with the root of the problem. The text makes a bold claim right off the bat. Consumption itself isn't the enemy, which is surprising because usually these conversations start with a lecture on greed.
That's a critical distinction. We're biological beings. We have to consume to survive. The source posits that the problem is unexamined consumption. Think about how much of our daily activity is just automatic.
Totally. We buy, we click, we watch, we eat often without a single thought about the impact or the alternatives or even our own limits.
It's like sleepwalking. You're just moving through the world on autopilot, swiping your card, because that's just what you do on a Tuesday.
Exactly.
And the text argues that these tyrannical or extractive systems, they gain their power specifically from that autopilot mode. They rely on us consuming automatically.
So when we don't look at what we're doing, we're giving them our consent by default. That's the blind consent.
That's it. So the mechanism of control isn't some gun to your head. It's your own lack of awareness. The system works best when we're all distracted.
And that's why the countermove is framed as the withdrawal of blind consent.
Correct. If the system relies on you not paying attention, then the most revolutionary act you can take is to simply start paying attention, to wake up.
I find that so empowering. Because if I try to think about dismantling a global supply chain, I feel completely helpless. But if the task is withdraw blind consent, well, that's something I can do right now, today.
It shifts the locus of control back to you, but not in a way that isolates you. It's about changing the terms of your engagement with the world.
Okay, let's get practical. The text lays out several ways to actually do this.
Yeah.
The first one is about reducing compulsive consumption. Now, I have to play devil's advocate here.
Go for it.
This sounds a lot like standard issue minimalism. Buy less, save the planet. How is this different?
It's a fair question because on the surface, the action looks the same. But the internal logic is completely different. The text focuses on pacing rather than deprivation.
Pacing. Okay, that feels completely different. Deprivation feels like a diet. It feels like punishment. Pacing feels like an athlete. Or a musician. It feels deliberate.
Exactly. Deprivation comes from a mindset of scarcity. I can't have this. But pacing comes from a mindset of agency. I am choosing to regulate the flow. The text explains that extractive systems depend on three things: volume, urgency, and disposability.
So they need you to buy a lot. They need you to feel like you need it right now.
Yes, and they needed to break or be obsolete quickly, so you have to buy it again.
Oh, that's the fast fashion business model in a nutshell. Or the tech upgrade cycle. Get the new phone now because your old one is slightly slower.
Precisely. So when you choose to slow down, when you say, I'll wait a week before buying this, or I will wear this coat for 5 years instead of one, you aren't just saving money.
You're structurally weakening a system that relies on that churn. You're disrupting the urgency.
Yes, you're reclaiming your time. And it changes that internal narrative from, I'm missing out, to, I am choosing to slow down because I refuse to be rushed.
I love that. And that leads perfectly into the second strategy, right? If
Mm.
we slow down, we still eventually need things.
We do. We need food, clothes, tools. This is where redirecting power comes in.
Right. The text uses this great analogy about energy. It says, where money, attention, and time go matters. It's not just about stopping the flow. It's about changing the direction of the river.
We often forget that money and attention are forms of energy. When you spend them, you are energizing something. You're feeding it.
So if you spend money at a massive conglomerate that exploits workers, you are physically energizing that exploitation.
Yeah, so the goal is to redirect that energy toward destinations that are actually, well, healthy. The text lists specific places, local economies, ethical producers, cooperative models, small creators.
But the one I found most interesting was repair and reuse.
Oh, that's a huge one. Fixing a toaster instead of buying a new one is a direct withdrawal of money from the disposability model we were just talking about.
It is. And the text describes this shift in a really beautiful way. It says this shifts power without meeting confrontation.
That's the quiet revolution idea.
Yeah. You don't necessarily have to be out in the street screaming that you can do that too.
Hmm.
But the act of buying your vegetables from a local co-op instead of a mega chain, that's a real shift of power.
It's a subtle redistribution. You are starving the extractive beast and feeding the regenerative community, and you're doing it through the mundane choices of daily life.
But to do that, to be okay with fixing the toaster or waiting for the local market, you have to deal with the psychological side of things. Which brings us to strategy 3, reclaiming sufficiency.
This is, in my opinion, the deepest psychological insight in the whole piece. It tackles the concept of manufactured lack.
Manufactured lack. Wow, that sounds like a marketing term.
It essentially is. It describes the entire engine of modern marketing. Extractive systems thrive on making you feel like you are never enough and you never have enough.
They create a hole in your psyche and then sell you the plug.
You've got it. So dissatisfaction is actually a feature of the system, not a bug. They need us to feel empty so they can sell us the filler.
If you felt perfectly content, the economy of infinite growth would just grind to a halt.
Exactly. And that is why the text argues that experiencing sufficiency is a defense strategy. When you realize you have enough, the manipulation loses its force. The commercials, the influencers, the pressure, it all just bounces off you.
Because you're full. You're not hungry for what they're selling.
And the text defines enough in very human terms. Enough food, enough rest, enough care, enough meaning.
Enough rest hits hard. I feel like exhaustion makes us so much more susceptible to buying things we don't need.
That is a crucial connection.
When I'm tired, I order takeout. I buy the gadget that promises to save me 5 minutes. I doom scroll because I'm too tired to read a book.
The system relies on your exhaustion. When we're depleted, we lose our discernment. We look for the path of least resistance, which is usually the one paved by some extractive corporation.
So reclaiming sufficiency means realizing that maybe the answer isn't a purchase. Maybe the answer is a nap.
It might be. It's a defense against manipulation.
I really like that. It makes gratitude feel like a weapon. Or maybe a shield.
A shield is a great metaphor. And once you have that shield up, you can start looking outside the marketplace entirely. This is strategy 4, building parallel value.
This section was really cool because it challenges the idea that everything of value has to be bought and sold.
We have become so transactional. If we need something, we assume we must pay a corporation for it. But the source points out that community, skill sharing, creativity, mutual aid, and care exist outside of that centralized control.
It lists these things as parallel systems.
Yes. If your neighbor helps you fix your fence, or you trade childcare with a friend, that is value being created and exchanged completely outside the extractive economy. No tax, no corporation, no barcode.
And the text calls these pressure relief valves.
That's an important nuance. It's not saying these parallel systems immediately replace the global economy.
Right. We aren't going to build a semiconductor plant via a neighborhood Skillshare next week.
Probably not. But these systems act as pressure relief valves. They reduce our dependence on the main system.
It reminds me of the pandemic, actually.
Yeah.
When the big systems started to wobble, when the supply chains broke, people turned to their neighbors. We saw mutual aid groups popping up everywhere.
That's a perfect example. When the centralized system strains, the parallel relational system steps in. Strengthening those muscles now makes us more resilient later.
It feels more human, which I guess is the point. But look, I have to ask, whenever we talk about living ethically or buying local,
Hmm.
I get this knot in my stomach. I feel like if I slip up, if I buy the plastic-wrapped convenience food because I have 10 minutes between meetings, I've failed. I'm a hypocrite.
And that is exactly what Strategy 5 addresses, refusing moral bypass and shame. The text is very, very firm on this. It warns against purity or superiority.
Oh, thank goodness. Because the purity trap is so real.
It is lethal to progress. The source says explicitly, shame fractures people and strengthens control. Think about it. If you feel ashamed, do you want to engage more? No. You want to hide. You want to give up.
So if I'm not aiming for perfection, if I'm not trying to be the perfect eco-saint, what am I aiming for?
The goal is coherence.
Coherence. Okay, break that down for me.
Coherence means that your actions are generally aligned with your conscience over time. It is about the trend line, not the individual data points. It means there's a logical connection between what you believe and how you try to live.
That is so much more achievable. It allows for the fact that we live in a messy world, and sometimes you just need to survive the day.
Precisely. And the text also mentions staying embodied and relational. Systems dominate us when we are disconnected from ourselves and each other. If you're beating yourself up over a plastic straw, you're disconnected from the bigger picture.
You're stuck in a shame loop, which is just another form of paralysis. Connection restores agency. That's the takeaway there. Stop trying to be perfect and just try to be connected.
Exactly. So we have the strategies: pacing, redirecting, sufficiency, parallel value, and no shame. But then the text pivots to what I think is the most radical idea of the whole piece.
It moves from what we do to who we are.
Yes, the internal shift. The text says, the deeper solution is not stop consuming. It is stop being consumed.
That line stopped me in my tracks.
Yeah.
Stop being consumed.
It just flips the whole script. We usually think of consumption as us eating the world, but the extractive systems are actually eating us. They consume our attention, our anxiety, our time, our self-worth.
And the text actually gives a list of things we need to stop allowing. It's like a manifesto of internal boundaries.
The one that stood out to me was, stop allowing fear to dictate urgency.
That's a big one. Marketers and politicians love to use fear to make us act quickly and irrationally. Buy this now or you'll miss out. Vote for this or you're in danger.
If we stop allowing fear to drive the bus, we regain our ability to choose. We can pause and ask, is this actually urgent, or is someone just trying to manipulate me?
Another one on the list. Stop allowing comparison to dictate worth.
That goes right back to the manufactured lack. If you stop comparing yourself to the curated lives on social media, the system loses its lever to pry your wallet open. You step off the treadmill.
And here's the one that hurts a little. Stop allowing convenience to override ethics. I love convenience. It is the hardest thing to give up.
We all do. But convenience is often the mask that extractive systems wear. It makes the harmful choice the easiest choice. The text just asks us to build the muscle of pausing and asking if the ease is worth the cost. Not the financial cost, the ethical cost.
And finally, stop allowing exhaustion to replace discernment.
This brings us full circle to enough rest. When we are exhausted, we lose our ability to discern. We just want the path of least resistance. Stopping the cycle of exhaustion is actually a form of resistance.
It's amazing how this reframes self-care. It's not bubble baths, it's political resistance. It's keeping your mind sharp enough to say no.
It's about maintaining the capacity to be human in a system that wants you to be a user.
The source material ends with a bit of a history lesson, doesn't it? It reminds us that we aren't just shouting into the void.
It notes that history shows repeatedly that when enough people shift how they participate, systems are forced to adapt or weaken. No single individual dismantles a tyrannical system alone.
You can't recycle your way out of a crisis by yourself.
But the system is made of people. It's made of our participation. If that participation shifts, if it becomes conscious instead of blind, the system has no choice but to change. It relies on our consent. If we withdraw that consent, the structure has to morph.
So the opposite of tyrannical consumption isn't starvation or living in a cave. It's intentional living.
Correct. Consumption aligned with values. Participation aligned with conscience. And crucially, Action aligned with capacity.
Action aligned with capacity. I really like that addition. It acknowledges that we can only do what we can do. We aren't superheroes.
And that is how power quietly redistributes. Not through a sudden catastrophic collapse, but through coherence. Through millions of people quietly deciding to pace themselves, to find sufficiency, and to support each other.
It turns down the volume on the system and turns up the volume on real life.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
So we've covered a lot of ground today. We started with that overwhelming feeling of complicity and moved to a strategy of conscious participation.
We realize that we don't have to run to the woods. We just have to wake up. We have to withdraw our blind consent and replace it with intentional choice.
We talked about pacing instead of depriving. We talked about finding enough to protect ourselves from manipulation. And we talked about letting go of the shame that keeps us stuck.
It's a journey from feeling like a victim of the system to being a conscious participant in your own life.
I think for me, the biggest takeaway is that stop being consumed idea. It's not just about my wallet. It's about my mind.
It is about reclaiming your sovereignty.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with a question. We don't want you to feel overwhelmed by a giant to-do list of ethical changes.
No, remember, action aligned with capacity. Do what you can, not what you think you should.
Exactly. So here is the thought to take with you. If the opposite of tyrannical consumption is alignment of action with capacity and participation with conscience, where is the first place in your life where you can withdraw blind consent today?
Is it in your pantry? Is it in your news feed? Is it in how you treat your own exhaustion?
Find that one place where you are on autopilot and just switch to manual control, just for today.
And see how it feels to have enough.
Thanks for diving in with us. We'll see you next time.
Take care.